Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Milabn Janaskum Neji. Apishtamin Gajibet Duxnian Otenhaujinet Skadgut. Wajagam Soy Mandy Gull-Masty and Sangaso Nagonieji we Higan Jab Chistmo Canada to Becha So Jaji Wijabachimad EU Otenhau Canada Chi. Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge Miabin and thank her for, introducing me and welcoming me in this space to be able to speak to you. My name is Mandy Gull-Masty. I'm just translating what I said in Cree. I am the Minister of Indigenous Service Canada, appointed by Honorable Prime Minister Mark Carney. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. I want to thank the chiefs of Nishnawbe Aski Nation and acknowledge the work of Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler and the Deputy Grand Chiefs, the elders that are here with us, the Women's Council, and in my language, Usnijud, the Young People's Council. Merci pour votre accueil et votre leadership. I know that there's a lot of power and strength in this room in advocating for their members, not only for the members of today, but also those that are to be. I also want to acknowledge that there's, with that power, a lot of responsibility in supporting everyday families, children, protecting the future, and building the strength of your nations. But I also want to acknowledge that we are in an urgent moment right now. For progress to really hit the mark, we must deliver real, measurable outcomes for children, families, and communities. This means that we have to act in true partnership and be guided by your priorities and by your leadership. I'm happy and I'm honored to share this space and being able to understand what it means to be a leader in a table like this. But I also know that I am now bearing the responsibility of representing and being the face of Canada and the history that that comes with. So I do want to say that I have a lot of bridge building and trust building to do. But I hope that you have the confidence in me to know that when I come here, it is with the intention to empower you in who you are as First Nations and respect who you are as distinct nations. I want to also today announce that $738 million will be provided to strengthen health services, governance, and emergency management for First Nations communities. This will include $283 million over 2 years to strengthen First Nations governance and capacity building. Through programs like band support funding, contributions to band employee benefits, professional and institutional development, and tribal council funding, we know that these investments are going to provide First Nations governments with the important resources and tools that they need to further support and strengthen their governance structures, planning, and core administrative functions. We want to ensure that we are working with you to continue delivering service and advancing priorities, especially the ones that we know are at the heart of every community, issues like housing and building the future of your communities. We are also investing $400 million over the next 5 years to support essential health services in remote and isolated First Nations communities. This funding is critical and will help support things like nurses and other health professionals, digital tools, and frontline care services. Supporting First Nations health services in communities where nursing stations have already been transferred expands access to communities, expanding access to community paramedics, and supporting options to receive care closer to home means that you are able to make those critical choices in how you want to receive care. Outcomes in this space are clear: strong frontline care services, service in community, service in your language, and fewer disruption for families, and not having to leave home are a part of a critical care pathway. Finally, we are also committing $55.6 million over the next year through the Emergency Management Assistant Program, or EMAP, as many of you might know it to be, to strengthen preparedness, response, and community capacity. As this world is changing, First Nations communities are often the ones to see and feel it first. They are disproportionately affected by emergencies. In 2025 alone, we had more than 45,000 First Nations people from over 73 countries, from over 73 communities in this country be displaced due to wildfire. There's a shift in our future that we must address. And for us to do that, we must collaborate and work together. This funding is going to go towards supporting the preparedness and mitigation efforts that we have seen be successes. This also includes enhancing initiatives within the fire smart area and providing essential emergency coordination. We know that this is one of the foundational areas that we can really help communities ensure their emergency management process. Separate from this funding announcement, EMAP will continue to fully reimburse eligible emergency response and recovery costs so that communities feel the support that they need when they're in crisis. I also want to acknowledge today the community of Sheshwan. On March 17th, I had the opportunity to visit the community alongside Grand Chief Fiddler and National Chief Woodhouse Nepinyak, and had the opportunity to also meet with evacuees in Niagara Falls. I saw firsthand the challenge of what it means to be an evacuation center. And I also saw firsthand what it means to find strength and resilience in a time that is very stressing for our First Nations members. I want to assure communities that we're here to continue supporting them for as long as it takes. But more importantly, we're working with communities and partners at every level of government to ensure that our next steps include restoring clean water and getting everyone home safely. I also have to be transparent and frank that I know that there are ever-evolving challenges in this space. I want to recognize the strain that displacement places on families and that efforts are continuously ongoing to ensure that evacuees continue to have access to the support that they need while they are away from home. This includes health, wellness, and community supports determined by them, acknowledging who they are as First Nations, ensuring that culture and support are reflected in that process. At the same time, while we are looking to help with progress in Sheshwan, we know that essential health services have to remain in place. Work is underway with our partners to restore safe water. Our focus is on a safe return and a long-term solution. We know as spring is coming, the season of the hunt is soon going to be underway. Many people are looking forward to their goose break, heading back to the land, being able to engage in their traditional activities, and find relief from the stress of being in an evacuation center. We want to do everything that we can to support that process. I also want to speak today about child and family services. Everything begins with children and their precious lives. We have a shared goal to keep First Nations families together and support children so that they can be in community, so that they can feel safe, loved, and most importantly, proud of who they are as First Nations peoples. We must ensure that we protect, maintain, and honor strong connections to their home and to their culture. Les enfants doivent grandir en sécurité, entourés par leur famille, par leur langue et par leur culture. Uji dwashin de magnod jimugre magnoda jishatagnoda jijiada udimono neshke jinoktado eada iwi don neshke etchetaxdo danishkaneshdo. Too many children are still separated from their families. This must change. We know that when First Nations lead this direction, this is where outcomes improve. In Ontario, the leadership has shaped a new path, one that I want to honor and acknowledge. On February 26, 2025, there was the signing of the Ontario Final Agreement with a plan of $8.5 billion over 9 years to reform child First Nations and family services in Ontario. This agreement not only respects your authority over decision-making for your children and provides secure, flexible funding that recognizes the higher costs of living in a remote and fly-in community, it is also enabling priority for you to advance throughout negotiations. I will do everything that I can in this space as minister to work with you to ensure that while we are addressing the implementation process of now, we are planning into the future and how we can gather the information and data to show that the success of outcomes driven by First Nations directly has critical impacts on the lives of First Nations children. The OFA agreement includes funding for prevention, First Nations representative services, post-majority supports, capital and housing, and also includes dedicated housing funds to keep children and families together and support reunification. What matters now is the delivery for your communities, strong prevention, support closer to home, and funding that reflects the realities of the North, so that children continue to grow up feeling loved and connected to their land, their language, and their culture. But funding alone is not enough. True change comes with self-determination. Leadership is driving that change here, and my department will stand with you as a partner to honor and support the work that you're doing. I'm looking forward to hearing the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal's decision on this agreement. I hope they will honor the leadership and the work that's been carried out. Let me also turn to another file, Jordan's Principle. Earlier this year, we had the opportunity to commit $1.55 billion in funding for Jordan's Principle until March 31st, 2027, to ensure that children continue to have access to essential services in the period in which we work on reform. I want to recognize that certain changes were created in the last government that introduced uncertainty for families. I know and understand that families need predictability. They need to have consistency in service. I've heard from many leaders across the country. I've heard from families. I've heard from the parents of children who use Jordan's Principle, and even from service providers across the country. Jordan's Principle must function better to respond to children's urgent needs. We've prioritized moving forward to make it more responsive, sustainable, and easier for families to navigate. In 2025, we are focusing on tackling the backlog of urgent needs and improving decision-making based on the needs of every child and every family. Since February 2025, we have addressed urgent overdue requests, which have dropped by more than 90%, taking them from 5,000 outstanding requests to 400. I want to also say that I know more must be done. Families and providers have addressed and faced delays that are unpredictable and are challenging and are taking a toll. Stable funding is what matters, and it gives families certainty and allows communities to ensure that they deliver those services with confidence. Les familles ont besoin de la clarité et une réponse rapide. C'est pour ça que nous continuons de travailler avec vous et travailler avec l'information que vous donnez pour assurer que les prochaines étapes vont refléter la réalité des familles autochtones. Every First Nations child needs to ensure that their reality is reflected in the reform process. For us to succeed, we must listen and learn and ensure that our next decisions are aligned with enhancing your opportunity and your responsibility to move forward with a path that is driven by consistency and continuity. I also want to speak about Choose Life. The same urgency drives our work with the Choose Life Initiative. Choose Life remains for many communities a lifeline for children and youth facing substantive mental health challenges. I also want to address, in some cases, a loss of life. That is why this initiative is critical and needs to be delivered in partnership with your communities, with non-member organizations, tribal councils, moving into the space and uplifting, supporting land-based programming, language, cultural camps, clinical counseling, peer supports, and prevention planning. I want to once again acknowledge young lives are lost in too many communities, and their memory is going to guide this work, and we must honor it with the decisions that we make. Since its launch, the initiative has helped thousands of young people reconnect with who they are, their culture, their community, and provide ongoing care, but also reinforce the respect of who they are as First Nations people. We have seen what is possible when we act together, and we must ensure that we move forward in partnership and acknowledging what communities want to choose for themselves. In NAN leadership, in NAN territories, in service providers, in communities, we've seen that they've built strong supports for children and youth, and that progress is what matters. Protecting and building these successes for me is a priority. I look forward to continue working with partners to expand access and in-community mental wellness programming so that children, youth, and families can ensure that they have the local supports when they need them the most. I'm also hearing clearly that families need to understand what supports they can expect, and that leadership needs to be able to plan and communicate to them with confidence. For us, that means building on what we know works and moving into a more stable, sustainable footing so that supports remain clear, consistent, and reliable for children who need them now, but more importantly, will also need them in the future. My focus is on healing and hope, but also knowing that I have to be guided by your needs and your direction. I want to recognize NAN's leadership in advancing control over health programs and services. We share a goal, a healthcare system where First Nations in Northern Ontario have greater control over decisions that affect them, that affect service, their needs, and their priorities. Transforming the health system to support First Nations control is a collaborative process. While it takes time and sustained leadership, we know that its impact will be the most profound. Nous avons ensemble travaillé pour se diriger vers des services dans des santé concus et dirigés par les Premières Nations. Together, we are negotiating a charter implementation protocol. This is a milestone that we're working towards to ensure transferring federal funding so that First Nations can, for themselves, design and deliver services based on what their priorities are. There is more work ahead, but with each step forward, we are bringing nations closer to self-determination. We have to stay focused on the long-term vision, but we must always ensure that we continue walking that path together and uplifting one another. I want to also speak a little bit about water legislation. I know that caring for our people also means that caring for the conditions that are around them in their life. Clean, safe drinking water is one of those foundations. Generations need to access clean, safe drinking water. It's central to well-being. It's central to survival, and it's central to culture. L'accès à l'eau potable est essentiellement une composante de la santé et la bien-être des communautés. It has been clear that legislation should reflect your priorities and your authority over water. I'm working hard with the Prime Minister to introduce legislation, which the Prime Minister himself indicated will be tabled this spring. I also want to acknowledge the leadership of those of you who have helped push this legislation to ensure that it will bring stronger protection to your communities. It will also respect your rights to self-determination and reflect your priorities and your concerns. We want to continue investing in water and water infrastructure. And in the meantime, I also want to acknowledge that we have been able to attain 151 long-term water advisories being lifted since 2015, many of these in the northern part of Ontario. But we are continuing the work, steadily responding and trying to ensure we lift the remaining water advisories that are in place with an action plan, with information, with planning, and ensuring that every step that we take helps communities that continue to be affected. We want to ensure that we're continuing to build on progress because we want to protect the resources that have matched the scale of your priorities. At Indigenous Services Canada, we are not facing major savings reductions in response to the current economic pressures. I want to acknowledge the decision of the Prime Minister to ensure that he protects the investments in First Nations communities. It's our government's distinct duty to First Nations people, and the opportunity that we have to move forward needs to be based on stronger, renewed relationships, especially in the moments when we face a crisis. In Budget 2025, priority is given to housing, water, and other resources to close the socioeconomic gaps and continue building infrastructure. Ces investissements vont soutenir les priorités des communautés et de leur développement à long terme. We are also looking to work and continuing to review internal costs to direct more funding to communities and to reduce duplications so that there is clarity in service delivery. We are investing $2.8 billion for urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing. We are also increasing the Infrastructure Bank's Indigenous infrastructure target from $1 billion to at least $3 billion. As for water, we are continuing to invest $2.3 billion over 3 years to renew the First Nations water and wastewater enhancement program and to support safe drinking water, wastewater treatment, and operations and maintenance. I hope and look to community to continue working with me to advance in this space, to uplift me and help me make the decisions that best suit you, but also to know and understand that as I push these files through government, I need your support. I need your leadership, and I need your community capacity behind me to ensure that we are making the right decisions for members. I also want to address the challenge of applying the Indian Act. This is really one of the toughest things to undertake as a minister. When I chose to come into this space, I knew that there would be a lot of work that needed to be done to address identity, belonging, and rights. For generations, the Indian Act has imposed rules that were determined based on who belongs and who doesn't, and often the reality of dividing families and communities, even in my own. Policies such as enfranchisement forced First Nations people to give up their identity in exchange for basic rights. These decisions had long-lasting consequences, and addressing them remains essential. Bill S2 was one step of that work. We wanted to work towards reinstating entitlement to enfranchisement individuals and registering more than 3,500 people across generations. It will modernize the Indian Act, and it will remove outdated language, and it will make it easier for individuals, particularly women, to be connected and to reassociate with their natal lands. This bill was shaped through direct engagement with First Nations and those who are directly impacted by enfranchisement. I know that this work is critical. As part of that process, second-generation cutoff remains a critical and deeply personal issue. One of my first public statements as minister was the determination that I wanted to introduce a second-generation bill. My intention was for the fall of 2026. Some of the things in that process have changed. I want it to be understood and known that with the process that is in place right now, the work is not finished. The question is not about whether or not we will lift second generation. The question is simply about how. I know that in the recent few weeks, there has been a lot of positioning to support a one-parent rule. I want to respect that communities have the right to decide for themselves. If you feel that a one-parent rule supports your community, that is your path to take. I also want to be clear that there are other communities who want more than that, who want a different option. It is up to us to work together in this space to find that pathway forward. It is up to us to ensure that when we look to the outcomes of the collaborative process that was launched with First Nations, rights holders, and organizations, we are reflecting a path forward that is diverse, that respects everyone's voice at the table, and is based on lived experience. We have proposed solutions for First Nations across the country, and in early 2026, we put in place an advisory committee that was established to assess the proposals from the collaborative consultation process. That phase of work is concluding. Following this, for the first time ever, formal consultations with rights holders will begin on second-generation cutoff and Section 10 voting thresholds. We remain committed to advancing this work carefully and collaboratively, and in a way that supports First Nations self-determination and rights to choose for themselves. The goal is a long-term solution that is First Nations-led, all nations. This assembly brings together expertise, lived experience, and solutions rooted in realities of Nishnawbe Aski Nation communities. Nous allons continuer de travailler ensemble avec le respect et la détermination. For me to move my work ahead, I turn to your leadership and I seek direction, advice, support. We will move forward together with accountability and respect and focus on the results that you're seeking for your members. I look forward to continuing this work with you. Miigwech.
Miigwech Minister Mandy Gull-Masty. We will be opening it up for question and comments. However, before we begin, I would like everyone to be conscious of the time we have today and the opportunity we all have together to be speaking with her on this platform. I would like everyone to be mindful of sharing this space, of sharing the voice with others as well, and to try to keep your questions direct and concise so we can make sure everyone has an opportunity to say what they need to say. And as youth co-chair today, I will be prioritizing the voices of women and youth during this. So I'll also be doing that. So to begin with, for questions and comments, we have Chief Kustachin Matadawabin lined up online currently. So if you would like to begin, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Minister. Thank you for being there. Thank you for taking the time to be with us as we have discussed such important issues and matters before the nation. And in all due respect, you're sitting there as a minister, as a political body, and as a government that continues to have control and still undermine our dignity and worth with their policies at play within Canada and within departments. And it's good words that you said and the announcement made with funding. But at the very heart of these issues is still, and especially in the remote north such as ours, and I'm sure you can attest to it because you being a Grand Chief and you being a life carrier woman, as a woman, a water carrier. And it's hard to trust what any government representative says to us when the spirit of intent of our treaty hasn't been acknowledged or honored for so long. And yet we have political bodies of our own making that try to advocate and present these issues at these tables. And I can only speak for my community and the hardships we continue to face. We did state a humanitarian crisis 3 years ago, and no one ever really came to our community. And it's really sad because I keep telling people, even our own advocates, Nan, Ku, National Chief, to spend a day with us and just not just to bear good news, but to let our people know that they see them, they matter, and they need to be heard and seen. We're still, a lot of our communities are still reeking in third world conditions, and that the government of this day wants to expedite a lot of processes to access minerals, energy on our lands, exploit our lands without our consent. And how can you have a partnership, a true partnership, and forging forward when your rights are being undermined, when you're not acknowledged as the rights holder on this lands? Mr. Nundagan, Mr. Cabbage Applehamagan, it's hard to reconcile something when our truth hasn't been heard. There should be no more Adobskits out there, and that's what I keep saying. What my fellow community in Cash is going through, it's how the systemic approach, it's how the piecemeal approach has been killing our nationhood for a long time, and we're still doing it today. We know what we want. We know what it needs, what we need to do in our communities to get it to a safe level, to a comfortable level where we can feel safe. But right now it's not. Everything what we try to for, we always seem to be baking in our own land. And I don't want to depend on the government forever, but it's also, but I realize that this is our resources. This is our money. And we shouldn't be in this state. So for me, that's how I feel. I feel frustrated. We come to these tables and we often hear the same spiels, whoever the ministers at that day is. And I don't know why we keep doing this over and over again. And I strongly urge non-chiefs, there should be no more Adwapiskat out there. If this government is really going to fast track everything, fast track our issues, the bread and butter issues that we're dealing with. We just got back land back. We're now 5 times larger than our reserve statuses. And I just got news that yesterday, and somehow it doesn't make me feel proud of the work that's been, because it was already rightfully ours to begin with. And we've been sandwiched in a box for so long, and it over the years crippled our community. I'm not saying I blame government for everything, but a big part is these systems at play. And we all got to do something together. We got to be more assertive. Nagong punigitiapan, Minglish kitutun, gananaskumutin minister. And I acknowledge you today. Minglish, I'm sure you have your own story of where you came to be, how you came to be in that place, just like every one of us. And I respect your position. And I respect you as a woman leader, as our own. There's no ill feelings, but you gotta understand, as a woman coming from my community and trying to help my community be healthy and prosperous. You know, it tears me apart. tears me apart. We have a lot of stories, a lot of things. Nagana buit yaban and ask what you meant to sagi hitting insta. What you?
Miigwech. Miigwech Chief Kusasha Matadawabin. Is there any response from Minister Gull-Masty at this time? Or you don't have to.
At the end.
Oh, okay. 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 All right. That's clear. Okay, Miigwech, for sharing your statement. I very much appreciate it. We will be moving towards Chief Gary. His last name is? Guzis?
Yes.
Oh, Chief Gary Kuzis.
Okay, bonjour, Miigwech, giving me this opportunity to speak. Miigwech, Minister, for your presentation. I know we met a couple times, but the thing is, I'm hearing same language over and over, minister after minister. You know, our boil water advisory is 31 years, and we went through with 7 prime ministers already. You know, and when is it going to be resolved? You know, there's a lot of losses within our community with that boil water advisory. There's one young family there that lost a loved one while they were getting water because of this boil water advisory. And there's a lot of trauma within that facility, that infrastructure. That's a failure from the department. We didn't create that water treatment plant. It's supposed to be a healthy living product that was provided for us. Now, the lives has been lost. You know, elders can't keep up boiling water for a lifetime. You know, second generation, my grandkids asking me, Papa, am I going to get water like this? I have no answer for that. You know, all the infrastructures are failing. I know you're paying a big price of the evacuation. There's a big price tag, yeah, every day. You know, displacing Saskatchewan. I'm on the same boat as him, as Saskatchewan. I got evacuated twice with that infrastructure. And our healthcare, we got evacuated. And there was a limitation to repatriate the people. That's how we got treated. So when is this going to be fixed? You know, how many more people will die on these infrastructures with the failure of the government? Prime Minister on December on Chiefs Assembly, he said they fell. The whole world hear that. And, you know, I just want to bring this up because there is so much frustration. You know, we have commitments after commitments, but there's no action. The healthcare today it's falling into pieces. Our own First Nations have to pay the travel to take our members for their appointments. I haven't heard any government talk about the drug epidemic that we're having today. How is that going to be fixed? Because impacts and connects with everything we're talking about here. I like to hear that drug epidemic, when is it going to be fixed? Same thing, mental health grows when you lose a loved one, almost every day. You know, saying partner as treaty partners, and hearing the government, the Prime Minister himself saying it, they fail their duties. So how is that going to be fixed? You know, we are the first people in Canada. We should be prosperous with all of our resources that we have. And now there's dictators that are trying to take over our lands. We don't get a penny out of it. You know, we got to put it in a box, as a colonial box, as a reserve. These things has to be looked at. You know, I want my future generation to live healthy. Today, can't. You know, hearing the governments, First Nations are going to prosper. How are you going to do that? The province and Canada, that's the same language I hear. When elections were put in, you know, the language was Canada's not for sale. Now that language that got swallowed up pretty quick from both levels of government, without recognizing First Nations. All the Bill 5s, Bill C5, First Nations were excluded. Where's accountability? Where's the true partnership that was signed with our treaties? You know, the Crown said people will be happy, people will be prosperous. You know, these are very important things that we face today. So, but I thank you very much for coming here and listen to us, our frustrations. You know, a decade went by already for my community, and hearing you that you lifted 150 boil water advisories, for sure not mine. Mine is 31 years boil water advisory. And our health system is falling apart. On those two infrastructures, the water and the healthcare system, we got evacuated on those. You know, our programs are on hold. These programs were taken to court. Choose Life, Jordan's Principle. Then Canada province holds the money against First Nations. So I thank you for listening, and miigwech. So thank you.
Good day. Miigwech for sharing your political statement. I am gathering that there is a feeling of mistrust of the government. There's a need for our self-determination, affirmed. This is our land. We need our voices heard. As we've been saying over the past few days, we need treaty accountability and to move on from empty promises. There's a very continued frustration with stagnant infrastructure development. So I appreciate the statements. Again, we're short on time today, and I really want to hear everyone's voices heard. So I request kindly and respectfully, not to dishonor anyone's lived experience, but I request kindly and respectfully for us to remember the short time we have and to please ask questions very directly and concisely, because we have quite a long list growing here of who's speaking. We're going to be passing it. I'm just going to go through who's on the list so far, and then I'll pass it over. So try and remember where you are. We have Chief Carla Duncan, followed by Chief Sherry Taylor, followed by Chief Archie Wabas, followed by Chief Sunny Gagnon, followed by Chief Mateus Anderson, followed by Chief Merrill Loon, and then finally Chief Bruce Achipiniskam. And then Chief Aaron, Proxy Aaron Gakabatum. Mingwich. So I will be opening the floor for Chief Carla Duncan, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Minister. Thank you for giving us this opportunity and coming to visit us. Same as all the other leaders in this room, I have many different urgent issues, but I come here on behalf of, I'm with the Independent First Nations Alliance. There's 5 communities that we work together, and to be considerate of people's time, to give everybody a time, I'm gonna read my questions. Minister, we are here after another fire in one of our communities. At this very moment, Kitchenemek, Innuwag, they are recovering the remains of a child at this very moment. After a house fire in KI, a child is gone, a home is burnt to the ground, and families are left to carry that loss. That is not new to us. Our communities have been raising these concerns about fire safety and the lack of resources for years. We have said clearly that these conditions are dangerous. What is going to be done differently right now to make sure we are not back here again after the next fire? Known risks and gaps in funding. We have been raising concerns about inadequate fire safety funding for years. These risks are not new. They have been clearly identified, and we have said repeatedly that they put our people in danger. Yet our communities are still living with limited fire protection and prevention supports. So I'm asking you directly, if these risks are known, why has funding not changed to reflect that reality? And how many of our children need to die before something is done about it? My own grandson was living in this this house that was not safe, and they had fire like chimney fires often, and we have no firemen or like funding to hire people for these emergencies. Accountability. IFNA and KI jointly filed a human rights complaint outlining serious fire safety risks in our communities. IFNA filed provincially and KI federally. These concerns were clearly documented. We followed up and were told not to request updates or risk delaying the process. That was 7 months ago. Nothing has moved. While you may be directly responsible for the commission, the issues raised in that while you may not be directly responsible, the issues raised in that complaint are within your responsibility. Now a child is dead. At what point does that become unacceptable to ISK? Housing. Overcrowded housing and aging infrastructure are increasing fire risk in our communities. What is ISK doing to address these conditions as part of the fire safety, not just housing policy? And for housing, when we get funding, we are given like a 1 month window, and it's very limited, and it's like we just get the basic housing. So if there's a fire, it just lights up like that. So there's no, it's not sustainable to have these houses, like they don't even last long. Emergency response in our communities, emergency response is delayed and access to services is limited. And we've been raising this for years. After the fire in KI this week, will ISK commit today to putting additional resources in place to improve emergency response in our communities? It's very limited. The line for fire safety protection, fire resources is very limited. It's like an option. It's not even essential. We can't even hire a full-time police, fire or emergency services to be available. Investigation. The chiefs of the Independent First Nations Alliance are calling for an investigation by the Auditor General into the Canadian Human Rights Commission, following a pattern of systemic slow walking of not only our complaint, but other serious First Nations concerns. If serious concerns like this are being delayed while communities remain at risk, what is ISK doing to ensure that this does not continue? So one of our main concerns, one of them is like the response that they got 7 months ago, where they were told not to keep coming back, not to ask about their complaint. So they want to find out like who gave that response. It was incompassionate, like they were telling them not to inquire about this complaint anymore. So we want to know like who did that. It was anonymous. It was just like a general email. And so those are my questions. Thank you for listening to me.
Miigwech, as we're being conscious of time right now, it is now 2:00. So we only have so much time with the minister today. I would like to give her an opportunity to respond. However, before doing so, following her response, we will be transitioning into the Open Chiefs Forum. I'm going to keep the lineup we have going right now of who's queued to speak. And then following that, the minister will still be in the room. However, we are no longer doing a Q&A. So she will be listening to your concerns, but she cannot answer at that time. She has to leave soon. So I'm going to open it up to the minister to have a response to these first few concerns. And then we will continue with this lineup and she will be listening. Egode? Egode.
I know that I've only had the opportunity to receive 3 questions. I will be in the room, and I do want you to know that I will actually still be within the vicinity of the forum. I do have some pull-aside meetings with some chiefs on some files that have been requested to meet. But I want you to know that I am here. I have 2 staff in the room. If you want to have a direct follow-up, I'll try to make as much time as available to you. I know I've had some really big questions. I've had some big questions on some big files. I want to first respond by giving you insight on how it feels to sit in this chair. And I want to first and foremost say, I can't imagine what it felt like for non-Indigenous ministers to sit here, to not have understanding of what it means to be a First Nations person in this country, to not understand what it means to grow up in a community, to not understand the importance and connectivity of family, and to not understand the importance and priority of your culture. So I want to first acknowledge that anybody who sat in this chair before me as a minister likely was trying to do the work of serving you, but I also want to say that did not have the shared reality and lived experience that I feel I have with you. There is a long history of what Canada did and perpetuated to First Nations people in this country. Everybody around this table, including myself, is a victim of that in some way, in some form or another. For the change to occur with how you have a relationship with government, there has to be a reflection of what you want that change to be. I've had the opportunity to be in this kind of meeting on many occasions, and it is really challenging to often hear the same question. For a relationship change to occur, somebody has to go into that space and work on three things. First, to change the mindset of the minister themselves. I get the opportunity to do that. Other people have asked to be in this seat and they have said no. But I've chosen to come here, fully aware and understanding when this mandate was given to me that I was going to encounter the brunt and the force of all of the mistrust that occurred with this ministry. So I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that that is a truth, but I also want to ensure that in looking forward, it is my intention to come into this space and do work in the space of changing and shifting the vision of the minister, not only for myself, but other ministers who I believe will be Indigenous ministers for the future to come. That is part of the work that I have to do, is to rebuild that relationship and that trust with you. I also want community to know and understand that for me to have success in delivering what you're asking me to deliver, it has to be a working relationship. And I'm also here to teach as a minister the capacity of how government makes decisions, how they respond to questions. And while I also want to say there are many outstanding issues, I have to empower you as First Nations communities to make those decisions for yourself. I'm not here to answer what the fix is. I'm here to give you the tools and resources that you need to implement that fix. For me to be able to offer that to you, it is a working relationship. There's also the very harsh reality that a systems change does need to occur. I'm not the first minister to come here and the question is asked to them, but I want to be the last. For that systems change to occur, there does need to be the structured collaboration of the intention of how to work together. While very much acknowledging that there's a history in place, there also has to be the visioning of what that next step is, what that next phase is, and understanding the capacity to deliver on the very real asks that I hear from over 630 communities across the country, and those who wish to become communities. We are in this ministry at ISK the 14th province. And I frame it in that way because we do everything to provide service from birth to death and everything in between: education, healthcare, identity, providing your documents for, your status card. We do everything. We are the only ministry that does that. And we have to work with over 700 different organizations, communities, First Nations. I am in a space of trying to bring the position of minister out of one that tries to give a solution for all and to respect your distinctness as First Nations, to ensure that I'm reflecting in programming your unique language, your culture, your relationship to your territory, but also the spectrum of communities. There are some communities in this country that are extremely high capacity. They do not even come to us for service. They're independent. And there are also communities that really need the support of Indigenous Services Canada, and they need that capacity to be built. Historically, this country has treated everybody with the same approach. That's why for me to ensure that I can successfully introduce a system change in the relationship with First Nations people, I have to first and foremost acknowledge that we are different, that we have different needs, that we have different capacities, and to build in that space. I know that, every time something is shared about Canada and, everything that has been outstanding, it is not something directed to me. I fully want to acknowledge that, I want to respect everybody in this room. I look to you as a colleague, I look to you as a relative, but there is work that needs to be done. And while I can try to work with you to acknowledge historical issues, I also want to be sure that part of that conversation is speaking about the future and how we can shift to ensure that we're working on a plan that not only uplifts you, but also harmonizes the collaboration across First Nations. I think this is one of the things that building capacity, empowering First Nations communities, teaching you the system of how government makes a decision is a critical part of the dialogue that needs to be had. I also want to share that it is often challenging to be in this space and to be responsible for a federal role, but to also face, the unintended consequence of the reality of a provincial decision. And this is part of the discussion that has to be had. Relationships with First Nations need to be a whole of government's approach, not simply a federal one. To shift the process from individualized, siloed, fragmented decision-making to one in whole of government. To understand that there is the truth of the history of outstanding and unfulfilled service, commitment, province, to pushing and moving forward into a place where the path is one that is driven based on protecting culture, identity, language, territory, and creating the space for solutions to be brought in place. This is very ambitious. This is very ambitious. And I have to, ask myself, is this something that I can fulfill as one minister? I don't know. But I know and trust that what I start will be carried forward and brought forward by communities. It is not solely the responsibility of the minister. It is First Nations communities that have to help other ministers who will succeed to be sure that there's a new path, a new process, and more importantly, a new action. This requires essentially a redirection of the system. I'm here to make sure that it is understood that I am one of the few ministers that is trying to work herself out of this space. Indigenous Services Canada provides operations support to communities. I truly believe that communities' right to decide should also be followed by communities' right to implement for themselves. And hoping that in working with you to define that pathway forward, we can identify steps where essentially in the future, Indigenous Services Canada does not exist because communities have undertaken the responsibility for themselves. This is my vision as a minister. This is the pathway that I'm working towards. But I also want to be clear that for me to have that success for you, it does require the collaboration. This is part of the bigger aspects of how I'm trying to lead this file, trying to support communities. I also want to be, clear that there is a lot when I come to meetings and I'm asked the question, when will this be done? And for me, the question is, how can we help to ensure that we are no longer asking that question, but moving and working towards what is the next step that we're going to take to finding solution for this? There are different responsibilities that come with this role. There are different files that come with this role, but I know that my success lies in having a good working relationship with you, being transparent, telling you what I can do, what I cannot do, and telling you how I believe this file can move forward by giving you the tools and resource that you need to advance it. But there is often a lot of challenge that has to be faced. And I think the best case is in Muskrat Falls. I want to acknowledge, I know that there is a life lost by a child. I know that the CHRT has, provided a response. And while I do not have authority over the CHRT, I can very honestly say I do not agree with the response that they did provide. When there's challenge, when there is issues that are faced in community, we have to work together to collaborate to trying to do that. And sometimes that can be timely, sometimes that can be quick. But I want people to know and understand that my intention in coming in this space and choosing to become a minister here is really to make sure that I'm building something that is going to uplift those future First Nations leaders that will be at this space. I will do everything that I can to help you resolve what I am in the time that I have being here. But a greater part of this work really lies in ensuring that we define our relationship with the Crown. We define the future outlook of how we want provinces to work with us, how we want federal government to work with us. And I say us because there will be a period in my life where I will no longer be Canada. And I want to be sure that whatever it is I leave behind, Canada is serving me as a First Nations person in this country with the greatest expectation of high quality, equitable, and fair treatment for First Nations. So I'm asking today, to really create that pathway forward. How can we do that? How can we work together? I know there's a lot of questions around promises that are made, funding that's put in place, health, infrastructure, water. I'm there to work with communities to be sure that they know and understand what that next step is. But I'm ultimately and essentially there to empower you to do the work. And while some things can be done quickly, as I had said, some things do also take a long time. I want to acknowledge that reality as well. I will leave the rest of the time for questions, but I really do appreciate, I know some of these conversations are tough for Canada, but I do come here knowing and understanding that ultimately at the end of the day, you are advocating and trying to determine the direction for the best life for your members. I want to acknowledge that work of leadership. It's a very high level of responsibility to be in charge of your members, to be in charge of your community. You're governing for them now, but you're governing for the ones to come. And it's my intention to do that with you and support you in this space as well. Yeah.
Chimigwich, Chimigwich. That was very powerful. That really resonated with me, that necessity for the mindset change of the fix, always looking for the fix. What are you going to do? And I appreciate you speaking to the importance of knowledge as power, of being politically literate and understanding these systems, taking the time to read books about this, taking the time to read books about political theory. And I also acknowledge your desire for a system reform and coming together as a whole community to collaborate, to create a pathway of communication between the governments, to create a succession for that. So Chimigwich, we're going to be transitioning away from the questioning period and we'll be moving forwards into an open forum. As I said previously, we're going to be keeping the order. And before Minister Gull-Masty leaves this questioning seat to go find a seat in the room, I would like to request for the chiefs and the audience today to allow her space as she is listening to the floor as we proceed with our open forum, and she needs to be hearing everyone's voices. It's frustrating having these colonial time limits, so we're trying to make the best we can of it in our short time this afternoon. So before she moves away, I would like to ask Grand Chief Elvin Fiddler to please come to the front to thank Minister Gull-Masty for her words today. Miigwech.
Yeah, miigwech, Minister, for joining our assembly today. I just want to say miigwech to you on behalf of the assembly, our chief's leadership, all the citizens of the Nishnawbe Nation, miigwech. Here's a little gift for you.
Hi, teacher, minister. Okay. Oh, wow.
There's our hometown. You can smell it. Oh, here. Yeah, and we haven't eaten yet, so.
I didn't know it. No, I said,
Where will you be sitting?
is this okay?
Oh, yeah.
He asked me to sit.
Right here's okay. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to be continuing forwards with the Open Chiefs Forum, and I'm aware of the agenda. It may seem that we are skipping over the mental health and addictions discussion. However, I believe the mental health and addictions discussion